I know the World Economic Forum thinks that one day we're all going to live in the pods and eat the bugs, we're going to have artificial wombs, and we'll fully be in a brave new world. I don't think we should go there. But some people on the internet, some people even on the tech right, think we should go there for the benefit of humanity. And we're accelerating toward that progress, if you could call it that, at a rapid rate. I want you to watch this clip.
We're the first company in the world that allows parents to actually sequence the entire genome of an embryo, so sequence 99% of the bases in an embryo's genome, which allows parents to detect risks for some of the most serious conditions, so heart defects, birth defects, pediatric cancers.
That's Noor Siddiqui. She's the head of Orchid, the world's first whole genome embryo screener, and she's talking to Ross Douthat of the New York Times.
But I think that the vast majority of parents in the future are not going to want to roll the dice with their child's health. They're going to see it as, taking the maximum amount of care, the maximum amount of love, in the same way that they, plan their nursery, plan their home, plan their preschool. All of these decisions are actually, extremely insignificant in terms of the difference between, is your child going to live with pediatric cancer, with a heart defect that we can't surgically fix, with born without a skull and never going to be able to make it to their first birthday. I think when people think about it really concretely in terms of what are they giving up, what are the risks that could potentially affect this child, I think that then it becomes about stewardship. It becomes about, how do I make a responsible choice for my family? How do I make sure that my child doesn't have to suffer in the same way that I do, in the same way that my sibling does, in the same way that my parent that I'm a caregiver for does.
Siddiqui claimed that it is responsible parenting and stewardship to edit out the possibility of serious disease or serious health risk in offspring. She's saying that we should be using the technology that her company developed to sort out the embryos that have a predisposition for serious health complications from the ones that are supposedly of higher quality. She's, of course, using very euphemistic language. She has this creepy nonchalance when she's talking, almost like this eerie smile that is not connected to human emotion, very robotic, when she's saying that we should be using this technology. And she's trying to make it sound life-affirming with eloquent language, but she's obfuscating what is actually happening here. So the counter-argument, of course, is not that a baby who would be unable to walk would miraculously gain the ability to walk, though anything is possible. It's that the baby with the predisposition for a disability would never be born because the parents would not select it under Siddiqui's technology. Fewer babies with health problems would be born, and this is supposed to sound merciful in her book, like we could snap our fingers and families would never again be burdened with a child with defects. Sounds a lot like Marvel's Thanos. In my last video, we talked about gene editing, much more extreme experimental scenario in which an embryo is edited to prevent disease like HIV or for superior IQ to get a higher IQ in the baby. This is different. We're talking about embryo screening, which is within the IVF process where a bunch of embryos are made, fertilized sperm and an egg, and in a lab, scientists are assessing which ones are likely to develop disease and which ones are not. And the ones that they determine are likely to develop those problems are separated, not implanted, and possibly discarded. Embryo screening, what I just described to you, is already happening in the United States, and Siddiqui's company is saying that we should make this more mainstream, more accessible to ordinary people.
Women are in a really difficult position, right? Because if that test is positive, if Down syndrome is detected, the only choice that they have at that moment is either to terminate that pregnancy or to proceed, versus being able to give that information at the earliest possible stage before a pregnancy has even started, avoids families having to make that really difficult decision.
Okay, so what she means by really important decisions is, will I throw out the embryo or the human life because the scientific projections say it may develop a serious condition in life? Or do I use the embryo in the in vitro fertilization process in the hopes of it implanting and becoming my future child? That's, again, another euphemism she's using here. Really important decision. The decision is life or death, and it's not the parent's life or death. It's the child's life or death. The other thing is that the proponents of this embryo screening, they've really convinced themselves that they're the good guys, like many utilitarian movie villains, like Thanos, as I just said, and they're saying it's more moral and merciful because it means that more parents will avoid aborting their children at 10 weeks of gestation when the woman is already pregnant, because 10 weeks is the point at which limited genetic testing in utero is now offered. She's saying this is before the pregnant process. This is when the embryo is already formed, which again, as conservatives and just not even conservatives, people who can look at an embryo under a microscope, that is a human life. That is a human life with potential, not a potential human life, which is what the left might say. But again, rather than spare more children, which is what Siddiqui is saying could happen here, because more parents won't abort the kid, they're actually going to sacrifice more children because they forgot to mention the steep price to pay in the IVF industry. The CDC estimates that more than 238,000 patients attempted IVF in 2021. If clinics created between 7 and 8 embryos for every patient, which I believe is standard, that's almost 2 million embryos in total that would be created every single year. 2 million human souls. In 2021, though, fewer than 100,000 embryos were brought to term, meaning fewer than 100,000 children were born as a result of in vitro fertilization, which means that between 1.5 million and 1.8 million embryos were created through IVF and were failed to implant in the womb or were the extras that were discarded. So what I'm saying here is that potentially almost 2 million lives were destroyed in the IVF process compared to the 985,000 lives the abortion industry claimed from July 2022 through July 2023. So it makes it pale in comparison. As I alluded to, companies like this have a very warped view of special needs. They don't think they deserve to live. They think that it's harmful to the people who have to take care of them, the society that has to deal with their health care, but also to the people who have the special needs themselves. And I would just point to the stats that show the life expectancy of people with Down syndrome is now 60 years old, so you can't actually claim that they don't live very long. I don't have a relative with Down syndrome. I do have a relative with autism, and what I'll say is that they find whimsy and joy in very small, insignificant things that most people do not. My brother has no cynicism, no pessimism. He lives life with a childlike outlook every single day. If you want to tell me that he has a miserable existence and that his peers with special needs have miserable existences, I just fundamentally reject that. And clearly, Siddiqui doesn't know enough people with special needs to actually see the lives they lead. To wrap up here, I want to show you this clip where Douthat challenges Siddiqui about what her procedure, what her technology will do to romantic relationships. He demonstrated to me the detrimental effect that her technology, embryo screening, will have on love when he read this poem titled, "After Making Love, We Hear Footsteps." Watch the clip.
But I'm going to read you a piece of a poem. It's by a poet named Galway Kinnell, and the poem is called "After Making Love, We Hear Footsteps." And the idea is sort of contained in the title, that the husband and wife make love, and it wakes up their child, and the child comes and gets in bed with them. And Kinnell writes, "In the half-darkness we look at each other and smile and touch arms across this little startlingly muscled body, this one whom habit of memory propels to the ground of his making. Sleeper only the mortal sounds can sing awake. This blessing love gives again into our arms." Sorry. Do you worry about removing or diminishing from human experience that aspect of being a husband and a wife in a relationship with a child?
What do you mean?
What do you mean? I mean, the fact that she's just staring with a befuddled glare at him, like just it's utterly lost on her, the connection that she's making, that Ross Douthat is making here between sex and procreation, which anyone with half a brain, this is not rocket science. Unlike what Siddiqui's technology is, which is rocket science, love is not rocket science. Sex is not rocket science. Sex has a purpose, which is conceiving children. And by making embryo screening, and by nature of that IVF, mainstream and widespread, you are stripping sex of its procreative nature artificially, and that will harm the relationship likely between husband and wife, which is deepened by sex. And it's really sad to see how confused she is by this concept. So Douthat, unsurprisingly, is also just utterly shocked. He has this mic drop moment where he responds to her. Watch.
Sometimes it is. But when you get a baby, most people get it from having sex. And so it's, yes, there's plenty of people who have sex without having babies. But most people who get a baby, it is linked inextricably to having sex with your spouse. And you're saying it's time to sever that for the sake, I concede, of potential medical benefits. I'm just saying, I think pretty clearly something that like poets write about would go away.
Yes, obviously, most people still have sex with the knowledge that a baby could result, because that is the natural process for making a child. But I also would push back on Siddiqui saying that people are already having sex way more than they're having babies. Well, let's investigate that. So Gen Z, my generation, is having less sex than any other previous generations. They're also dating far less. I would argue that we have already seen a glimpse of what sex that has been made transactional and basically bereft of meaning and consequence looks like. Because we have contraception and abortion available on demand, sex has consequentially been cheapened. And as a result, I think you're seeing younger generations not partaking in it as much because it doesn't mean what it used to. It is not sacred the way it used to be. If Siddiqui's technology is actually made mainstream the way they envision, I think it is very possible where you have a world where sex isn't happening at all. Because again, if you remove the procreative part from sex, I don't see how you can even, like, it might just be for fun, but there's something that's missing in the experience. And people may just abstain from it altogether. Gen Z is already abstaining a lot more than they used to. Food for thought. If we open Pandora's box with mainstream, widespread embryo screening, you can bet that we are going to be launched down a slippery slope to a whole lot of other craziness and wild absurdity, and that would be gene editing, which is a far more interventionist, invasive medical technology that was actually punished when it was attempted in China with imprisonment, but it could be on its way into the United States. For more on that, click here.